I'll kick us off here. My name is Sean Dempsey. Again, you're at Selling Liberty, the point of our conversation. I'm an author. I'm a published author of children's books that are liberty-minded. And our goal as authors, and we'll have Howard will introduce himself as well, is to basically, we want to try to educate you guys on how, what we've done so far at least, and what we feel has been effective in our areas of influence to get a message out and publish a book and communicate that to people who are interested. So my background is I have a Free Stater. I moved to New Hampshire 15 years ago. I think I was number like 126 of the Free State Project. And ever since then, I was a little interested in the Libertarian Party specifically because of the leadership, but so I stayed more on the periphery. I kind of focused on basically getting what I felt was the liberty message out to friends, family, colleagues, etc. But over the last 3-4 years of just madness, I've gotten a lot more politically involved and motivated. Certainly in the LPNH right here in New Hampshire, I joined the party, or I re-involved myself in the party, became vice chair of the LPNH currently, and then I just really started my form of activism wasn't my writing. I really feel like, my blog wasn't really getting very much. My Facebook was always getting banned. So maybe there's ways that I can really reach an audience that's a little more effective. So I started pursuing that, and we'll talk about that in a second. How about yourself?
My name is Howard Lichtman, and I write as the voluntarist author Etienne de la Boetie2. My book is called Government, the Biggest Scam in History, and I'm in the middle of the 5th edition. The 5th edition will be Government and the COVID, the two biggest scams in history exposed. I began the book as a way of trying to expose my kids were in the government school system. I'm divorced. And I began the book as trying to explain to my kids the little tools and techniques that governments use in the hidden curriculum of the schools. And I originally put it together as a Excel spreadsheet, and it was kind of impactful. And I used a lot of imagery, and I tailored it to their visual learning, and it was effective. And so I did in 2017, I went to the Nexus conference with about 10-15 copies. I gave it to some luminaries. I got feedback on it. I improved it. And the first edition came out in 2018. I sold 200 copies. The next year, in 2019, I sold 200 copies. In 2020, I sold 800 copies. Last year, I sold 3,850-ish copies, and the book began selling virally. And so out of the 3,800 copies, over 1,000 of those were sold as something called Friends Bundles. And so people began buying the book in 5s and 10s and donating them to libraries, putting them in little mini libraries in neighborhoods. And so I went, and I'm in the process of getting it, producing a 5th edition of the book. And the book is backed up by a credit card size flash drive. And so one of the other things that I did that was kind of unique is I took all of the reference material, I took all of the full-scale visualizations, I took the book itself, and I put it on a credit card size. Originally I started with an 8 gig flash drive. Then we created a 16 gig, then a 32 gig. The 5th edition will ship with a 64 gig drive. That is stuffed with not just evidence to back up the book, but the best in voluntarist thought, the best books on liberty. We've got some David Friedman on the flash drive. We've got some Larkin Rose on the flash drive. We've got some Murray Rothbard on the flash drive. We've got documentaries for people that like documentaries. We've got short videos for people that like short videos. And so one of the things that I've done, or I've tried to do, is how do you innovate and get material out into an audience where you're being censored. And so the tips that I'd like to give to you is, if your book is controversial, how do you, what do you do to get around the kind of the algorithmic censorship of the internet, the algorithmic censorship of social media, and the, just the, chain bookstores. How do you deal with chain bookstores? So I'll kind of talk a little bit about that today too.
In terms of format, just to jump right in, so we purposely, again, trying to make this at least we didn't really get a chance to talk about this, so I'm kind of going off the cuff, but I wanted to make this kind of a conversation. I didn't want to be us preaching at you, and here's how you do it, and yeah, you know, we can certainly offer our guidance and suggestions on what's worked for us, but I was hoping after we maybe talk a little bit more about, and I'd like to chat a little bit about my books as well, is, you know, I'd like to learn what the room is trying to do and see if, you know, because maybe there is a square peg, round hole component, not what everything that works for the two of us. We actually have very, very different books. He wears the big boy pants between the two of us. He's really preaching to an audience that really wants the facts, the data, the analytics, and God bless that. I'm trying to do the opposite because I make children's books, so I'm trying to dumb down the message of a Friedman or a Hans Hermann Hoppe and really get it to a 6 to 12-year-old level, so that very, very similar to the Tuttle twins, if you guys are familiar with that, which is a whole other paradigm from what you're doing. So I'm purposely not sending the 32 gigabyte drives because they'd probably just chew on it. But anyway, the point is, what I was hoping to do is part of this conversation, because we have a good amount of time, is we'll talk a little bit about what's worked for us, and then what I'd like to do is open up the floor and hear about some of your ideas, what you've done already, what you're maybe trying to do or you're planning on doing, and then we might be able to opine with some suggestions or commentary or ideas, if that works for you, or we can just rattle on from the front. Again, I'm happy to do whatever you want, but I thought that would be a little bit more engaging of a format. Sure. So, and just so, really hats off to what your whole project. That is phenomenal growth. My story. So I have a couple books. This is one of them here. This was just published actually last 2 weeks ago. But I put out children's books in the last couple years that are oriented primarily right now around the combating, I would say, the COVID regime. You've probably heard that term before. I did not make that up, but there is a whole mentality in our ecosystem right now, our ethos, that is pushing this narrative. Is that even your dog?
It is my dog.
Okay.
My dog.
I see, now I feel totally upstaged. So I feel like the last couple years we've seen an unprecedented just shift, cultural shift towards tyranny. And it's happening right in front of our eyes. It's happening in a way that it's not just like the frog's been slowly boiling over the last 10 years. It's like we went from nothing to full blaze in an 18-month period. I mean, not only was it, 2 weeks to flatten the curve down to, going on 3 years, but everything about we constantly give and give and give, and there's no pushback on the other side. They're going to take whatever we give them. And so my whole message, and it's oriented at the children, because to your point, if you don't get them while they're young, the public system will. And so if we can, put together material, and this is my view of the world, that helps at least prime the pump early on in the time period when they're young, and let them experience and understand some of these more nuanced conversations. Like, why is the world going mad? How does that actually help? Does that help combat the disease? Well, why are we doing it then? Why are we mandating these things? Some of these questions are very complex, but I find a way of breaking them down in 2 of my books, the more recent ones, in a way that hopefully breaks through to the younger generation. So that's my goal as a libertarian author. And again, I'm certainly not the first and won't be the last, hopefully, to do that. But if you do have young kids and are interested, I got a bunch of them. I'll be actually just giving them out at the end of this. I really am trying to just get the message out to as many people as possible. And when it comes to, so this is a part of why you want to show up. So one of the things that I've been doing to promote my book, so because for the reasons we'll be talking about, the culture, the society does not resonate oftentimes with our message of liberty. When everything is pushing against the message of freedom, from corporate media to social media, having their truth Nazis in place and telling you what's true and what's not, rather than let the individuals figure that out for themselves. Everything is working against our ability to get a message out there to the people. And so what I've found, this is something that I learned early on, is that you can't always go against the system all the time. You're going to be beaten down. You're going to constantly be beaten down. just putting it up into the fray. So social media would be a good example. A lot of times people have said, I'll just put it out there on social media and it will get picked up. The algorithms are going to work against you. It's just how it is. No matter what you use, the powers that be, until something changes, until there's a complete paradigm shift, the entire system of the social media apparatus and the corporate media are going to be pushing against the message, right? That's absolutely right. So I'm talking about social media, yeah, absolutely. So that's where I was going with this, is the way to get the message out there, in my experience, is own the experience, own the process, own the downstream. And that can be done in a handful of ways. So what I highly recommend is maybe step one, not that I don't have any fancy slides here for, I'm just going to be throwing ideas out there that's worked for me, but create a website. It's so easy to do in this day and age. This is not 1993 where you have to learn HTML. You can create a website with a couple hours on Wix, on a Squarespace, on a GoDaddy page. These site builders are really straightforward. Or if you really want to go crazy, you can hire a web developer. I actually am a web developer on the side. And you can really make your web presence as good as possible. But own the content. That way you have no one else that can really shut you down, essentially, and you put that message out there. But number two is equally important, is how do you get that website out there? Because you put a billboard in the middle of the desert, it's not going to reach anybody. So I found a lot of experience. What I've been trying to do is find the community that you're reaching out to and find what works, what is appealing to them. So I reached out to, for example, to Tom Woods, and I got the website mentioned on Tom Woods' website podcast. I reached out to Dave Smith. I paid for advertising to get my book publicized on Dave Smith podcast. I find libertarian podcasts and publications, and I push them, and I find ways to incentivize it. Obviously they're going to have an advertising model that you can buy into, but a lot of these, we're all libertarians here, and everyone has a way of we want to see the same thing. We want to see freedoms in our lifetime. So you can, if you just say, hey, this is my budget, I'd really like to work to get whatever you can give me. Finding these opportunities out there. Find the local liberty leaders in your area, in your state, and they're going to have a sounding board for you. So don't do it alone, I guess is my main takeaway, is find other thought leaders in your space, in your area, in your community, or even in the national community that you can reach out to and take that message once you've furnished it, once you have it localized, and get it out there to as many people as possible. And that's been very successful for me. What are some of the things that you'd recommend? What's worked for you? You mentioned there was some ground spring movement there. Obviously, it kind of went viral. But did you do anything to kind of prime the pump or jumpstart things with your book?
So my book is a little bit of an effort of how do you take somebody from 0 to 60 in the shortest amount of time. And so in my previous life, I used to be a productivity expert for Fortune 500, 125 companies. And most people are visual learners. And they come to insight much quicker if they see something versus just hearing it auditorially. And so what I tried to do in the book is I'm trying to leverage the ways that human beings learn to be able to bring them into that moment in insight like that. And so mine is a little bit of a scientific experiment of how do you create a book and make it not just accessible but effective. And the accessible part is really, unfortunately, it's a picture book. Because if it was a text-only book, there's only about 10 to 15% of the population that is going to engage with a text-only book. That is just what we're doing. But if you turn it into an engaging picture book that's full of fascinating visualizations and historical photographs and memes and things like that capture the attention almost instantly, then what I've found is you can raise the amount of people that will engage with the book from 10 to 15 to 45 to 60 plus, and they're just kind of hooked, and it's like leafing through a magazine in a barber shop or something like that. And so what I've been doing is I've been testing it, like focus grouping and testing it to try and make it more effective to where more and more people, like I take out content that might be offensive to some based on feedback that I get from, people that have read it. I put in other stuff that addresses issues about voluntarism or about the free market or about the market mechanisms that deliver the goods, because people ask me questions about that. And so I'm trying to make it more and more effective with every single thing, but because I'm exposing the illegitimacy and the criminality of government, I recognized that I wasn't going to be able to get it out on YouTube. I wasn't going to be able to get it out on Twitter. And so I didn't put a lot of energy in those platforms. I have those platforms. I've got hundreds and hundreds of subscribers. I've got 8,000 subscribers on email. But like my email list is the main thing that you're going to be able to reach. And even with them, I'm getting censored. So like we popped out a brand new URL. My umbrella organization is called the Art of Liberty Foundation. I'm trying to start a voluntarist think tank, the likes of Cato and Heritage and CEI and those guys, but coming from the principled voluntary standpoint that all government is illegitimate. You can't have a legitimate government, and that what I want to do is research the absolute criminality of what's going on in D.C., exposing the boss hog corruption, the $14,000 toilet seats, the $400,000 F-35 helmets. And so I knew that I wasn't going to be able to, to use the traditional things. And so I focused on email, and I focused on getting the book out in liberty groups. So I go to conferences like this. Sometimes I'm a speaker, sometimes I table. I'm a squirrel trying to get a nut, so I'm going to entrepreneur my way in and try and, if I've never spoken to that group before, explain who I am. I've got a media kit. I'm a little bit different in that I've been raising money as a foundation to try and have the resources and to have the capabilities to reach more and more people. And so, I took a marketing effort, and I put something into every single alternative social media platform so that I can go out on every single social media platform to try and see which ones are effective, which ones will stick, which ones I can't be censored on, which ones I can be censored on. So I made investments in alternative social media. I've made investments in marketing automation. So it's not just a regular website. I've got a website that does the best of marketing demographics to be able to drip irrigate you through a buyer's journey. I sell other books. So I sell bundles of books. I'm probably the number 2 seller of Larkin Rose's books, next to Larkin Rose. And so I did things to create a store and have the best of libertarian content. But going to the Liberty events, I'm out there actually selling it. So like I'm actually working it. In a previous life, I worked on Wall Street. I managed a gladiator academy of commission-driven mercenaries. I was a sales guy that managed sales guys on Wall Street, so I know a little bit about sales. And so when I show up, I'm there to sell my book. I'm like working, the crowd as hard as I can, because I know that if I can get it into somebody's hands in a different sphere, because the liberty movement already kind of knows who I am for like a lot. Like I've got pretty good penetration in the liberty movement. If I can get my book physically into somebody's hands, I'm not going to be able to reach them on the internet. Because of the censorship, I just count on not being able to reach them on the internet. And so if I can get word of mouth by getting it into somebody's hands at an event that I didn't go to last year but went to this year, I almost value, selling one of those as much as, 10 digital downloads or things like that. The other thing I did is I really focus on the physical book, because once people engage with it, it's hard to put it down, versus if you're trying to distribute digitally and you email it to somebody, chances are if they're busy and they've got an email box like mine, it's going to get crushed down, maybe they're going to do it. But if you give them a physical object, now it's become a physical thing in their world, and they're not going to forget about it, and they're hopefully going to engage with it, like it, tell others. The Friends bundles, the biggest thing that I'm doing with the 5th edition is we're creating a little mini guerrilla pop-up bookstore. So I sell the book for $30 retail. Because of donors to my foundation, the Art of Liberty Foundation, I can sell low-cost. I'm essentially being price subsidized to sell low-cost bundles of the book in 5s and 10s and things like that. And so what we did is we created a kit because people were already doing this. People were putting them into coffee shops and yoga studios, and they've already been distributing the book. And so we came up with a little bundle that is 10 books, 10 flash drives, and everything like a business owner would need to attractively merchandise the book in a small footprint. And so my goal is to get these little mini bookstores out there where you buy, 10 copies and 10 flash drives for $250. If you sell it all at list, it would be $600. If you sell them as the bundle that we do, it'd be $450. And so I'm going to allow retail store owners to share in the profits of the book to try and get around the censorship of chain bookstores and everything else that I do. So those are just some of the ways that I try and innovate to get to get a book out. Wow. that is being openly censored on all that. So I was right about YouTube. I could tell you stories about the censorship, but I think I made the right decision in investing in. Yeah, so I think I made the right decision in investing in getting it out to real people at real events like this, instead of trying to focus on platforms where absolutely I've been censored.
Sounds like that's a recurring theme here. Is find the way that you can control the downstream, for sure. But I am interested in pivoting for a second. I don't know if folks are interested. Like I said earlier in the format, I would like to hear about some of the ideas here from the folks sitting here. And is anyone working on a book currently, or are all of you working on a book? Does anyone want to talk to what your struggles that you're facing, or opportunities that you're having, things of that nature? I'd love to hear from that. Yeah, that'd be great.
Hello.
My name's Eric Lichtman. I'm working on a book, like a secession-oriented book. There's a number of them out there that are already that discuss what secession is, and I find they're not as effective as I'd like them to be. I think there's space for it to be a little bit more concise, a little bit more to do, as opposed to talking about conceptual ideas. I love what you said, including resources. So as you were speaking, I was imagining that I'm writing this small book, almost pamphlet-like document, but also including with it a USB drive that has like a number of different source documents for people that want to do that. Because there's a lot of really great source documents that dispel a lot of the myths about secession. From my perspective, this is a self-published process. I don't see myself as shopping that book to publishers and getting it picked up by anybody. Yeah. I can't imagine that would work in any way, shape, or form. So that was really one of the things that I wanted to get answered in my time with you here today, was that self-publishing process. The little stuff like how that happens, who does illustrations, who does covers, that type of thing.
I can answer for myself. I'm sure you probably. So we're both on our own journeys here. I think that anyone that gets up here and like, this is how you do it, is lying to you about anything, not just this. But I think that there's going to be a bell curve. There's going to be different answers to all sorts of these questions. What's worked for me, I use Amazon KDP. It's Kindle Desktop Publishing, I think that stands for. Basically, direct publishing, excuse me. It is a way of self-publishing in the current age that hasn't existed, I think, ever before. Amazon, and I know it's the big behemoth, and I don't know how some of the crowd may feel about some of the big tech giants, but and I certainly had my own reservations, but they make self-publishing, one of the easiest process.
KDP?
KDP, yeah. If you go to kdp.amazon.com, what you want to have is a manuscript. So, and to your point earlier, too, I mean, if you really want to create a publication that is going to be well received, well read, I personally, certainly for children's books, but even for the other educational materials and for adults, you want to have pictures in there, you want to have diagrams, you want to have source material, you want to make sure that you're citing yourself. If it's just your manifesto, that you're going to be hit or miss. But if it is like, this is a documented historical, precedent, here's the reasons why I'm saying this, here's the citations, etc., which it sounds like where you're going, and then here's the artifacts, pictures, what have you. You want to put together, again, that document using, say, a Adobe Illustrator file, or an Illustrator file or an Adobe file, or some sort of designer-esque document that can be uploaded to their platform. That's the easiest way I find to self-publish. And honestly, after you fix some issues involving bleed and the size of the page type and things like that, they ask you some pretty straightforward questions. It takes care of it all for you. Then you create a wholesale price, you create a retail price, and then you find ways. You even have Amazon's ability to help you market it and promote it online with some advertising dollars if you want to. That's the easiest way to, on a couple shoestring budget, to self-publish in my mind.
Follow-up question then. As far as it relates to Amazon, and I'll hand up the mic to anybody who wants it after. How about Audible, like in terms of audiobooks? What are your thoughts about publishing in a audio format?
Have you done that, Howard?
Mine's a picture book, so I haven't done an audio version yet.
I haven't either, so I probably am not the best person to answer that. I do know that when you do publish on Amazon, they give you the opportunity to do a digital copy, which is a Kindle version of the book as well. And they also have an upload an audio file capability. I just haven't pursued that particular option, but I know they make it easy to do so if you want to do that. Of course, then it comes down to the obvious question is who's gonna narrate it for you? You're gonna do it yourself, or you're gonna hire somebody? You can buy vocal talent online very cheaply. I know this from my web design company. We buy, we can for like $40 you can buy somebody to read something for you. Probably won't be an entire book, but a half hour worth of content for $40 is not a bad deal. And then extrapolate that to the cost that it would be for the size of your book.
I wanted to throw in on publisher versus self-publishing. And so, I completely self-publish. I make it for a nickel and I sell it for a dime, and then I get the majority of the profits. I make it for about, depending on how many I'm doing, what kind of size print run, it's about $6.50 on the low side, going up to $8 if I'm only doing a very small thing to be delivered here kind of a thing. I sell it for $30, and then I sell, like I said, these bundles where I drop I'm only making maybe $2 on each book in the bundle. But compared to my friends that have publishing deals, they only make $1. I mean, I'm surprised at the amazing profit margin. How much more you make now. If they get you into Walmart, if your publisher can get you into Walmart, or your publisher can get you into Barnes & Noble or something like that in a big way, maybe you're going to see some kind of value for that. But I have not seen any value in working with a publisher at this scale, at this level, when you really can do everything yourself. I do a lot because I work with graphic design firms. I have a graphic design firm that I would recommend. It's called Duck Design, and it's $700 for unlimited graphic design for a month. You get an entire graphic designer. They're in Belarus, and there's some language issues, and they're not on the so you're getting there's trade-offs and everything. But you can have a graphic designer for 30 days for $700 a month. You can go to Upwork and you can find an editor, you can find illustrators, you can find Upwork is a service where you can find freelancers around the world. You can see how they're ranked, you can see examples of their portfolio, you can make a decision on whether or not you want to hire them, you can start them off on an hourly basis, and then you can move them to a contract. It's a very flexible platform that keeps your costs down. Upwork.
Yeah,
it's called Upwork.
I would echo that. No matter how good you think your book is, no matter how many people you've had read it and proofread it for you, just have a professional editor look it over.
Oh yeah. An editor will improve you as a writer. Nothing will improve your writing like an editor. Absolutely.
But you can also get your illustrations on Upwork. You can get your editor. You can hire your handyman on Upwork. You can do anything. But it's a great service to find very talented service-based individuals. And sir.
I noticed one or both of you mentioned thumb drives, to put it out on thumb drives. Did you say that?
So my book is backed up by it's a credit card size flash drive.
Flash drive, sorry.
It's a little pin, and it flips out of the card, and it goes into a USB drive the same way. It just doesn't have the box protecting the little thing, and it goes right into a USB drive, and then that has everything that backs up the book. It's got books in PDF, it's got short videos, it's got documentaries. My book I do a lot with visualizations where I can't get the entire visualization on the page, so I'll have the visualizations backing up the book. I did a podcast like a week ago, and I was taking Richard Gage on Richard Gage 9/11 Unleashed through the book, and I'm like, and when you click on these links, because the PDF version of my book is backed up where you can go through the book and click on, like if I'm making a claim, I'm actually giving you a link in the book, and then you can see in the hard copy book that it's, that there's a link there, and then if you've got the Liberator or you download it from the thing, you can actually go into the PDF and click through and see it. And so it got censored. There was an article, one of the articles that got censored was, I'm exposing how the intelligence agencies and the military are behind 800 plus movies and 1,000 plus television shows where the military is.
Came out this weekend, I think.
Yeah, man, they're behind all these movies that are glorifying the government, making it look like the government's legitimate, and most people don't know that there's 800 plus movies and 1,000 plus television shows.
You can boost that number way up if you go to the 3-letter agencies.
Right. So I was taking through it, and we click on it, and in the book I'd linked to an article on the Medium platform, and Medium is a platform that you pay for. You pay Medium to do it, and a group called Insurge Intelligence had written a very well-referenced expose on everything that the Department of Defense, they've got an office in Hollywood, what the movies are, what the DoD gets out of it, how the process works. Very detailed, very well-referenced. They were paying Medium to host it, and Medium censored it anyway. They took it off. They literally censored that article off Medium. And so I also have that article on the flash drive so that my reference material for the book can't be censored as well.
So my main question about the flash drive is, I can't imagine you get a lot of people that are willing to put a flash drive, anybody's flash drive, into their computer.
So mine has no executables. The only thing that there's no executables on it,
But how would they know that?
So I say it says it on the back of the flash drive. It says safe for your computer, no executables. And now I'm actually working with my vendor so that it gets sealed at the factory, so that they put it in a folder. For the next version, I'm going to have a retail kit for the flash drive, and it'll go into this folder, and it'll be sealed at the factory to where if it's not sealed, then you shouldn't buy it. And so there's another level of safety there.
Do you somehow know that you've gotten responses from putting it out that way?
What do you mean?
Off the flash drive, do you have any way of knowing that people utilize that and you've, say, made sales that way?
I get people buying the flash drive. So I've sold
Okay.
I've sold 5,000 plus books. I've probably sold almost 1,000 flash drives. No, I probably sold 750 flash drives.
Well, I might say, again, I'm just armchair quarterbacking this. If you don't want to put out a thumb drive with the book, the other alternative is, again, we already talked about building a website. You can create a paywall and have information, PDFs, videos, whatever else behind on that website. Especially if you're working with a decent web host, they're not going to take your stuff down, especially if you have a relationship with them of some sort. So that's another way of doing it. That way you don't have to necessarily ship hardware with your book, but I'm sure there's obviously reasons to do that as well. But go ahead.
Yeah, you write children's. My girlfriend and I are interested in a concept for sort of children, tweens type thing. You're talking about sort of selling grassroots, right? Having a physical item, going face to face. Before you have, say, children reading your books and engaged in them, how do you create that engagement? How do you sort of share your story?
Before they have kids, you're saying?
Well, yeah, there's some build-up there, right? You're talking about that sort of viral build-up where you're starting, Harry Potter before any of the kids read Harry Potter. Sure. Well, before someone was reading your book.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So, I was a little selfish about it. Me writing a book for kids was completely dependent on the fact I had a kid, and she was living through the worst of the COVID regime and asking me questions every day, like, "Daddy, why do they make me wear a mask at school? Why can't I see my friend? Why are our neighbors not talking to us?" These silly questions that broke my heart, and I was really having a hard time saying, well, baby, people are insane. Having and being, what does that mean, Daddy? So trying to break this down, and she was only 4.5 at the time. Now she's 6, but so for me, the impetus for some of these the getting this message out there was completely dependent on what my lived experience and what I was trying to do. So I wrote these books, the first couple books for her, and then once I realized that, I gave them to my friends and family, and they were really enjoying them. Like, there's an audience here. I'm not sure if this is answering your question, but I found that what I wanted to do is just create a wellspring movement within my community, which at first was my family, then my friends, then my colleagues, then their friends. And the book kind of, if it's written well and it has a message that resonates, you don't have to be the advocate for every copy. It's going to develop its own life to itself. If that viral moment that you experience, and that I was very fortunate. I'm certainly not the best writer, probably even in this room, but I think I touched on some topics that were really hitting hard in the community that was very emotional to me and important to me. And then other people that had kids picked up these books and they took on a life of their own. So again, I wasn't selling every copy individually, and it wasn't until I got probably about 1,000, 500-600 copies sold, or at least half of those were probably given away, that I realized that, let me try to get a larger audience here. And that's when I started dovetailing into, like I said, the libertarian communities at large and my local New Hampshire here. And certainly then I started going on podcasts, or at least getting advertising done on podcasts. Does that answer your question, or did I just dance around it like I sometimes do? So.
By the way, since you brought up podcasts, I describe myself now as a professional podcast guest. So I don't do my own podcast. I just like to say I go on other people's podcasts and rock the mic. But that really is one of my, probably my number one sales strategy is that I've got a Trello board. I don't know if you guys know what a Trello board is. Kind of like a project management board, where I've gone and over time have developed a list of all of the libertarian, voluntarist, podcast hosts, radio hosts, etc. And sometimes I'm writing. But after this 5th edition comes out, I'll now go and I'm like a plate spinner. Sometimes I'm spinning the writing plate. Sometimes I'm spinning the marketing plate. Sometimes I'm spinning the going to conferences and talking plate. And then sometimes I'm spinning the PR plate, where I'll actually have a PR person and we'll be smiling and dialing, this entire list of podcasts. And I'll set up just a week or 2 weeks of just back-to-back podcasts. Just back-to-back podcast. And then some podcasts I went on the Corbett Report. It drove $37,000 worth of book sales in a month. Sometimes I go on a podcast and it drives $5,000 worth of book sales. Sometimes I go on a podcast, it drives $500 worth of book sales. Sometimes I go on a podcast, it drives $0 worth of book sales. But that really has been probably my number one marketing tool, is getting out there to people that have the same audience as I do, that appreciate the material, that are looking for this kind of information, and then I just go on and tell them about the book, and it sells itself.
Yeah, and I think that's really good. A positive spin, leaving this room, maybe a really good optimistic way of looking at, as writers, as libertarian writers and authors, is the pool that you're preaching to isn't the pool of all readers, right? It's like you're getting down to a smaller and smaller pool that you're going to be the major predator in. I mean, you think about it like, I think my friend the other day was looking for he was left-handed, and he was looking for a left-handed racquetball racket. And I'm like, how many companies put those out? Because he couldn't buy it. He finally got one, and I looked it up, and there's like one company that puts out left-handed racquetball rackets, and they dominate that space. And you think about in the writing community, the libertarian, for at least right now, and I hope this changes, the libertarian authors and writers out there, we represent a niche community, and recognizing that the avenues and the marketing and the promotion tactics that we take need to go through that lens, that we need to be pushing our message, understanding that it's to a niche community, and trying to be as big a fish as we can in that small pond. Because we have events like Pork Fest, we have podcasts that we can go on to, we have kind of a built-in family that we can be reaching out to, and at least in helping to monetize some of the work that we do. And I think that that's a really encouraging thought, that we don't always have to be the big writer. We're not competing with the John Grishams, right? We're competing with the handful of other libertarian
yeah, I
authors
want
out
to.
there.
So news you can use. One of the things that I've tried to do is exactly what he said. So I've tried to spread the love around the community and go to the voluntarists and libertarian content creators that have cost-effective marketing opportunities for people like me. And so when I first got started, one of the best investments I made is Monica Perez in the Propaganda Report on her Patreon. She had a Patreon like $100, I think it was like $100 a month level, and for $100 a month, you got 2 shout-outs. I think, over the course of like one show or something like that. And so that $100 a month probably drove $3,000 a month in sales. And so I'm constantly looking for somebody like that, it's like a content creator that has a cost-effective thing which would reach my target audience. Just right, boom, that is, the Propaganda Report is my target audience. It was absolutely perfect. So I'd recommend looking for things like that. I've sponsored Pete Quinones. I've sponsored Ernie Hancock. I've taken out ads on Agorist Marketplace. I've taken out, so I'm trying to target the audiences, but I'm also trying to support the other content creators that are doing, we're all trying to move the ball the exact same direction. So I'm trying to support those people as well with my marketing dollars.
I know we had
But it's got to make sense financially too.
I know we had a question right here. I did want to say one more nugget of a little hack that I did here too, by the way, is we mentioned the website again several times. Tom Woods runs a promotion where if you do hosting through him, he gives you a free call out on his podcast. Advertising on Tom Woods costs $4,000 an episode, by the way. You take a $12 subscription. I already had a website, so I'll tell you what I did. Don't tell him I did this, but I just took my website. I bought hosting on his little referral program, copied my website over, called it out. I got 600 book sales that week because he called out my website, and then I pulled my website back over. But that's a great way of doing it too. There's always little ways of hacking the system as well. You can find the communities, find where you can get your message out, and anything you can do to reach your community, no matter how, as best as you can, is always going to be a good idea. But did you have a question, right?
Yeah, so my question is, how do you break out of that niche market, right? Like, everybody here already agrees with your ideas, right? Like, you make kids books. So there's people here who want to teach their kids about libertarianism, like that's a good medium for them to do that. But how do you get your ideas out of that libertarian ecosystem and keep the interest of people in the community at large who actually need to be exposed to them? And like, how do you get your books into the hands and from the eyes of the general public?
So when I rock out like a libertarian podcast or something like that, that there's some percentage of that audience that is going to be, number one, outside of the community. So I'm going to reach it either because somebody forwarded it along, or somebody recommended it, or they stumbled across it, or so there's some kind of thing that's reaching some percentage of people that's outside of our core target audience. And then all of the other podcasters, they have an insatiable need for new content. They got to do, there's this explosion in podcasts, and they've all got to have 52 guests a year kind of a thing. And so what I'm trying to do is trying to give a real good, engaging experience to the libertarian guests, where somebody else listening goes, man, that dude would rock it out on my show. I want to get him on my show. And so that's kind of my strategy. And then when we do the PR effort, we're sending the producers of kind of mainstream stuff. I'd love to get on Valuetainment. I'd love to get on London Real. I'm trying to get on, I'm making a concerted effort to get on London Real and things like that. But I'm using the fact that I rocked it out on James Corbett, or I rocked it out on the Propaganda Report, or I rocked it out on Microaggressions, or I'm sending them, one of my best podcasts, where it was it was engaging and it was powerful and the audience really loved it. And you can see in the comments, I get 95% positive comments. They love it. And so then hopefully, you know, one day I'll get to the right person at Valuetainment, or I'll get to the right person at London Real, and they'll, you know, and then they'll do it. So that's the kind of my strategy. But for the most part, I've only had a couple that have really kind of gotten out of it. I did Alpha Vedic, which is kind of, you know, tangential, but it's reaching that other audience. It's more holistic and healthcare. And it was a really, really good, really good podcast. 5,000 views on YouTube. So I mean, it was like that, you know, and it wasn't exactly my target market, but there was overlap.
I think we have to end in a second here, but I'll answer your question just by. Is that the bell for me to shut up? I'll answer your question by saying that. You know, my introduction to libertarianism was twofold. One was Ron Paul, and two was my best friend handing me a book. And my goal, it won't be maybe necessarily with one of my children's books, but my goal for one of you, all of you, is that I hope that you write that book that your friend gives to you, gives to them, and says, you got to read this book, man. This is going to wake you up. And not every book's going to be like that. We're going to probably be 1,000 stinkers before there's that one that really breaks through to him or her. But I think books are an incredible powerhouse of bringing forth the libertarian message to the larger community. And to the extent that my book or Howard's or anyone here can help open people's eyes, let's do it, man. Let's just do it. That's the way we're going to change the world. All right? So
give it
thank
up
you.
for our guests, Howard and Sean. Thank you, guys.